When temples came to be built of stone, nothing structural corresponded anymore to triglyph and metope. They became decoration. But this tenacious adherence to traditional form, originally religious in nature, brought with it architectural complications at the corners of the temple. A triglyph had to be set at each corner of the entablature. It offered a visual termination and had been a structural necessity when the temple was made of wood, for the triglyph then marked the head of the beam coming in at each corner at right angles. But the pattern of horizontal metope and vertical triglyph, when applied to stone, which has a broader construction than wood, left only part of the metope at the corner, a condition which was plainly intolerable and had to be straightened out. This could be done either by making the corner metopes broader or by shortening the interval between the columns at the corner. There were many possible variations between these extremes, and the problem was solved by each architect in his own way. The top of the temple consisted of the pediment, its raking cornices, and the guttering or the pegging, formerly called the cyma. The Temple of Hera has lost its cyma and also the figural decoration, which explains why the roof seems flat and rather squat. We must think of it as having been luxuriantly ornamented, as a crown to the whole building. The vertical open screen of the colonnade is contained between the strong horizontal lines of substructure below and entablature above. At Paestum, as at Olympia, next to the developed classical temple, an earlier one stands, or rather sprawls, with 18 columns at the side and 9 in the front. Even if, in our imagination, we restored the cella, the inner chamber of the temple, whose stone blocks were stolen and used for other neighboring buildings, there remains with us an impression of spreading heaviness, a lack of concentrated tension. The ancestors of these columns were tree trunks. It's easy to believe that from the distance they appear quite slender, but under their immediate shadow we sense a brooding massiveness. The column shaft stands on a broad surface. Under the load of the superstructure, it swells like a muscled arm. The curve of the capital appears to bulge between the column shaft below and the square abacus above. The heavy burden is drastically, naively evident. The decorative border between shaft and capital is carved with incredible delicacy compared to the brute force expressed by the columns, a bracelet with ever-changing ornamentation. The columns of the older temple are 22 feet high, 20 slim flutes, and then the bursting tautness of the massive shaft. The columns of the classic temple are almost 30 feet high, and in relation to the weight they carry seem much more compact. But the 24 deep flutes act like a tight-laced corset. In the older temple, the curved capital was rather like a cushion pressed flat. Here it burgeons powerfully out of the shaft to meet the load of the architrave. A series of carved rings is the only decoration of the classic Doric capital. The columns are now so closely set against each other that the abaci practically touch and give the illusion of a continuous wall. The Temple of Zeus at Olympia is structured according to the classic plan, in harmonious design, visible from all sides, each dimension in proportion to all others. The ground plan is basically that of the Hera Temple at Paestum, and the architectural variables are naturally similar. The Doric column, for example, cannot be arbitrarily stretched or shortened. The colonnade of the cella must therefore be constructed in 2 stories. The 2 rows of columns are erected in proportion each to another in size and in the number of flutes, the lower colonnade 20, the upper 16, so that the upper colonnade naturally continues the tapering of the lower one without losing its entasis, that is, the gentle swelling of the shaft, which gives individual movement to each column. Horizontal forms in the classic temples always show a subtle swelling. The verticals incline inward. The tension created by these tiny deviations from the straight line, giving life and movement to the whole building, is hardly visible to the eye. Measurement alone proves its existence. The transition from the archaic to the classic temple can be compared to contemporary development in Greek sculpture. We can see that this archaic boy has his weight naively, rigidly poised on both legs. The later classic concept is counterpoise. The hips tilt up to the downturned shoulders, an interplay of movement and counter-movement, giving to the body, calm and relaxed to all outward appearance, an inner tension communicating itself to every limb. The Temple of Hera at Paestum shows only the structural frame, the load and load-bearing elements. The Hephaistos Temple, poised above the Agora of Athens, is the only one sufficiently preserved to show the cella as a solid, three-dimensional object within the open screen of the colonnade. If one ignores the misleading shafts of light entering where they should not, one can visualize dark shadows of solid background behind the pillars. Something is still missing from the picture we're trying to create. The crowning cyma, the guttering, the light-colored stucco which once covered the limestone. And above all, the colors. Above there was the cyma of painted terracotta, the acroteria, the waterspouts, and the antefixes. The horizontal elements on the entablature were colored red, the underside of the cornice, the row of guttae, the pegs, and the taenia, the continuous fillet below the triglyphs. The vertical elements were in blue, that is the mutules underneath the cornice, the triglyphs, and the continuation of the triglyphs, the ledges under the taenia. This is how the waterspouts of the Sicilian temple in Himera looked when they were first excavated, but the colors have gradually faded as they were exposed to the air. These waterspouts and antefixes from the archaic temple at Thermos indicate how strong and brilliant the colors must have been. Aitos is a Greek word for the eagle. Aitos is also the term used by Greek masons for the pediment of the temple. The pedimental field allowed room for contemporary artists to express the spirit of the people in full public view. This small excavated clay model of a house with a gabled roof and two posts in front might well be the forerunner of the Greek temple. The pediment is open, perhaps allowing the smoke to escape. The earliest decoration to adorn this house would have been an ornamental fixture to protect it. A mask of the hideous Gorgon Medusa. The main beam of the house would be protected against the damp, the evil spirits kept at bay. In one of the temples of Selinus, the entire colored terracotta revetment of the pediment was a setting for the Gorgon mask. The Temple of Artemis on the island of Corfu is the earliest stone temple experts have been able to reconstruct. Its 8 front columns support the earliest sculptural pediment of a monumental size, 54 feet long. In the center, the Gorgon Medusa, some 10 feet tall, a grotesque face with tongue outstretched and teeth bared. Snakes twine through her hair and belt her waist. She seems to stride along, wings outspread, wings on her boots, and flanked by 2 enormous panthers. Myth has it that whoever gazes at the Gorgon is turned to stone. The mask placed on the roof beam or set up as a pedimental figure wards off evil and the bringers of evil. Figures belonging to the Gorgon myth are added in small scale to this heraldically balanced composition. The angles of the pediment present a problem and a challenge for the artist. Within the natural, practical limitations of this triangle, certain archetypal statements can be made without deviation from an immediate subject. Here is a king or god enthroned, a spear point directed against him. A reclining figure, presumably a fallen warrior, is pushed into a corner. But the angle of a pediment is perfect for indicating the position of defeat. In the right corner stands Zeus with a thunderbolt in his hand. He's fighting a titan or giant. The size of the figure seems to bear no relation to the importance of the event. There's just no more room in the corner. The whole composition, carved in yellowish limestone, was once resplendent with strong colors, to some modern eyes perhaps even garish in quality.